Welcome to Own the Season podcast. We will talk to industry insiders along with outdoor enthusiasts to help you own your season. Now let's join hosts Art and Michelle Helen with Brad Jones. Own the Season podcast is sponsored by Griffin Armament, the oldest privately owned silencer manufacturer in the United States. Go to griffinarmament.com to learn how you can get a silencer shipped to your door. Griffin Armament, engineered silence.
Hello and welcome to Own the Season podcast. I'm Michelle Helen along with Art Helen and Brad Jones today. So, what do we think about the deer season so far?
Hot, miserable, not
need
a lot
camo
of
shorts.
Need camo shorts. You know, it's
At
usually
least around here. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of the country is, experiencing abnormally, warm weather too. So I don't know that we're alone.
I don't think so. I think out west, as far as, the elk seasons and stuff, and of course that's, they're during the rut anyway, so they're doing their thing. And, I know a couple passes already got shut down for a few days because they already had so much snow out there in those passes and they're open. But for here in the Midwest, it's been stupid hot. And
I mean, the thing is, right, the animals are still living out there 24/7. They're not going anywhere. They're more likely to move when it's cooler, so that makes them more likely to maybe be moving at night this time of year. Some people are still, shooting deer around here, though. What do you think's the difference between them, the people that are having some early season success in the Midwest versus, us, for the most part, getting skunked right now?
Well, depends on where they're at in the state. We're in a CWD area where they hand out tags like candy, and so I think our deer population numbers are down a little bit. And there's people out there killing deer. They've had those deer patterned and sitting on food sources, ag fields, different areas. There are some areas in the state where you still can feed deer, so that's helping with the early season pattern. They're the biggest things. I mean, we've got food, water, cover, everything on ours, and we still have deer, and they're moving. It's just that they're not moving till after dark. And I think, again, one is, we don't have the deer numbers, and so they don't have to get out and try to get that best food source. They don't have to get the cream of the crop, because if they're an hour later, they're still going to get there because it's not getting over-browsed and over-eaten. And so I think they can move, when they kind of want to move and do what they got to do.
And I think, too, also, now's the time to be hunting your small kill plots, too, because the big ag fields, the beans are starting to brown, so deer aren't going to those, traveling as far to the destination plot. And if you have water on your property, and a key too when it's really hot.
And I mean, the crops are drying really fast. I mean, they're already taking all the beans, around here and starting to chop some corn. And I think that's part of the other thing is, what ag do you have in your area? There's parts of the state where people are killing a lot of deer that's not as big as agriculture area as we are down here. So they may be the only food source if they're on private land, the only water sources if they're putting those in those areas too. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that play into it. You also go northern Wisconsin to southern Wisconsin, and, they may be 6, 7, 8, 10 degrees cooler than we are here. And that,
Sure.
That makes a big factor also. We're talking... this Friday and Saturday, they're still talking pushing 90 degrees, where they're talking, 80, 81 up there. So that's a big difference, for getting things to move at different times.
Acorn sources, too, they might stay a little deeper into the woods where it is a little cooler if they can, don't have to travel so far for their feed, right?
Right. Yep. And acorns are huge protein right now. So, they're going to be on that protein, getting ready for the next phases. And, because we've been so hot, our early season, what I consider early season is, we're October. And so, we're transitioning out of that early season phase here for Wisconsin and moving into something, into if you want to call it the, lockdown or not lockdown breeding phase, but, everybody says deer don't move in that first week of October, second week of October, and I think you're going to see some of that because of the way it is, because then they're getting into the pre-rut. And, we're going to talk about that here in a second as this transition starts to happen. But for us, I know one of the big things that's helped me keep my sanity away from editing all the time and stuff, and it's probably kept Michelle's sanity because she doesn't have to see me as often and put up with me. But I've been morning and nights because it's been so hot. I've been out, goose hunting, early season goose hunting and stuff with some friends, and filming, getting some content doing that. So that's kind of kept me busy right now, getting ready for this next phase of deer season.
Yeah, that's when I used to do a lot of my waterfowl hunting too. When I bow hunted and waterfowl hunted, I always liked that early season for ducks, and then it got me through that stage where I wasn't seeing a lot of deer movement because of the heat, and but still got me into the outdoors.
And it's.
Go ahead. I think that's important, to recognize, that if they're not seeing things, seeing deer, and rather than, be frustrated, and maybe be in there when hunting really isn't that good. They can show up anytime, animals don't follow the script all the time, but rather than maybe be frustrated and be in there and make a decision that really isn't very good and push the deer and have a lot of scent in there, is there anything else you can be doing this time of year outdoors to satisfy that itch and be outside, whether it's waterfowl hunting, whether that's musky fishing or fishing in other species, but what else is there that you can do right now to kind of lay off the deer hunting and to kind of give yourself a mental break and not, do anything that's going to be detrimental to your hunting season overall?
That's a great point, and that's really overlooked by a lot of people. A lot of people, when they're not seeing deer, they get into the woods even further and pressure the deer even more, and now you've messed up, that potential buck that you've been chasing. Just sit back. The better hunting's yet to come. If you don't have something patterned right away that you can kill, this phase right now where the deer just aren't moving because of heat is not the time to be aggressive, I don't think.
Yeah,
I think we're at the point where let's hunt smarter, not harder, and recognize when to maybe back out versus push it and hunt harder.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thankfully, I've had some guys get me into that waterfowl and duck hunting, and so it's taken a little pressure off and give me other things to do than being in the woods and messing that up. And I think you bring up great points with that, Shell, that as we mature as hunters, I think we also learn that hunt smarter, not harder. And the harder we push that, the more we might be screwing it up instead of, watching and from a distance and going in there when we know the time's right, and that animal is there instead of pushing it out of that area. So, great insight on that.
One thing I was reading not too long ago on a forum or on a Facebook group for deer hunting, or might have even been a Wisconsin hunting group, I don't remember. Somebody was asking about mock scrapes, and it sounds like this person was asking, is it too early to do those? Should I use them? I know you've, in the past, I know that you're a fan of mock scrapes and even get them going, pretty early in the summer. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I usually start, now they've become part of, their culture, and they've become, kind of a community scrape, a lot of them. And that's what I strive for, is trying to find areas to make community scrapes. And that's, your ridges, your food plots where there's, these deer come in all year round. People think that they just make scrapes during that pre-rut and rut, where deer make scrapes year round. They check a scrape year round. It's a community scrape where they go in and, hey, did Frank make it through last year's rifle season? Man, I don't smell Frank anymore. He must be dead. So they're there putting their scent down and checking things. And a lot of times, because they don't have the bucks lose their antlers, they still have those same scent glands on their forehead or on their eyes. And so they're going to rub on those tree branches. They're going to nibble on them with their mouth because they have, glands in the corners of their mouth. And then obviously when they pee on those scrapes. And so getting them on that community scrape to run that, year round is what I strive for. And I actually start those, during turkey season, April, May. If I've got scrapes that I look and go, hey, this is happening, I'll actually freshen those up at that time. And the problem is a lot of people use, doe and heat or, when bucks are in rut, they're using those scents. And they're using the wrong scents at the wrong time of year. They need to really be using forehead gland scents. They need to be using, just a straight doe or a buck urine, things like that, just to keep those scrapes going and fresh. And so people are using the wrong scents, and deer know. They're like, this is crazy. I know I don't have does and heat, in July. And there might be one out there that's crazy, but, for the most part, they know. And you get these things started, and again, and I've got hundreds and hundreds of trail camera photos where I could, if people wanted to reach out to me and talk about starting mock scrapes, I can talk about it all day. And I've got all the photo evidence, video evidence in the world to support this stuff. So you start them early, because the later you start those, a lot of bucks have already changed out of their home range, where this way, if you get those deer in there early on those community scrapes, what happens is usually they already know who's who. They go off of body size for a while and then antler size. And so they're going to find out through that whole summer whose home range this is now going to be. So instead of moving off somewhere else, they've already become the dominant one because of those community scrapes and what they're doing. So you're going to have a better chance of keeping those within your area, or if they do move out, to come back into there. So, that's a great thing to start early in the year, which can be beneficial throughout all seasons. It can be beneficial, early season, the pre-rut, the rut, and post-rut, because they're going to be checking those all the time.
I know you said that you like, you start yours early. Turkey, if you see some activity, I also know you start them in July. It's a newer one. If somebody doesn't have one started, is it too late? Could they still start a mock scrape now? Hold off on the estrus scents?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's go out and do that, and one of the big things that a lot of us have done over the years, on the team, they've talked to me about it and stuff. And what I like to do is I like to put either a actual, you cut a tree and put part of a tree, right out in the middle of the field, or for myself, we're using some different things that, we'll put them on a pole, and then you have branches on there, and I'll put that out by my stand in a field, in my clover field, in my brassica fields, things like that, and start the scrape under that. The thing is, people are like, well, why are you doing it there? Well, you want to give that animal a place to be, a destination. So if you're sitting over an 1.5 acre food plot, that deer can go anywhere it wants in an 1.5 acre and maybe not give you that opportunity. However, within that 1.5 acre food plot, if I have a mock scrape set up for a south wind and a mock scrape set up for a north wind, that is the best of both worlds. And you put those, upwind of your tree stand, so that gives that animal a destination to go to within that acre food plot or 1.5 acres. It gives you that shot opportunity. And so that's why I like to start those early too, because then those deer are going to be consistent coming to that all year round. And it gives them a little more comfort to be in that area where you want to be able to shoot that animal. It's a lot easier to shoot an animal where he wants to be than trying to force him somewhere. And if you've already made it so that his pattern or her pattern, man, it makes life easy.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I've always said the more things you give that buck to do when he gets off his bed on your property is the better chance you'll have to kill him, and the less chances your neighbors will get, because it's going to want to stay on your property, whether it's scrapes, communication poles, whatever you're doing, just something to keep the deer more active on your property.
Right. Make it so there's like no reason that they have to leave. Right. I know, and I think two things come to mind. And one is that, like you said, maybe less likely to be on the neighbors. You can't control what your neighbor does. All we can do is, you can try to make your own property, whether you own it or if you lease it and you've got some, the ability to do some things, all we can do is you can make your own property more attractive, and give the deer like everything that they need. And that includes, the does, because where the does are is where the bucks are going to be later, and those bucks, like you said. And I know, we've just, we don't have a huge chunk of property here in Wisconsin, but I do know that, the wardens or biologists have expressed surprise at the number of mature bucks that we seem to be able to hold. And I think it's because, we're doing as much as we can to give them everything that they need.
Yeah, and that comes down, to a lot of years of habitat management and working with so many different people and looking at the entire overall goal of the property. And you and I have, both sat down and talked to them and different things on our property along with the neighbors. And I think for the longest time, I was so focused on just white-tailed deer that I was missing the overall picture of habitat for that property. And once you give them that entire habitat, it's a whole different thing for where those deer want to hang out. Learning their summer range is different than their winter, or where they like to bed and how they like to bed. Different food sources, how deep ponds need to be and water. And so it's been an ongoing, 30-year project to figure this out. And once we have, and I think part of it is we've got great neighbors who want to do the same thing. So the neighbors are following in our footsteps, and they're creating the same habitat, which is, now producing more mature deer. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're producing more 180-inch deer. That has a lot to do with genetics. We do have some genetics where we do produce some good deer, but there's also genetics that don't produce. We've got a couple older deer this year that, if they're 130 to 140 inches, I'd be impressed, but I don't know if they're going to get there. However, they are still an older, mature deer, and to get them to that point, and hold them in a state like this where, the biggest majority of deer still getting killed are your 1 and 2 year olds. And so it's nice to see, getting these deer to that 4, 5, 6 years old, and a few older than that. And I've had people, well, are you really sure that deer is that old? I send every one of my deer that's killed, because I look at them through trail camera photos and assume that they are the same deer. And most of the time, you can, if you study photos and stuff like I do, you'll find out real quick that, it's that deer is actually, that same deer. You're pretty sure that it is because you look at markings on that animal, whether it's the ear, double white throat patch, just something, a lot of times the telltale is the brow tines, in the shape of the rack, because they will grow stickers as they get older, or if they were, in an accident or wounded or something, things are going to change. So you assume it is, which, like I said, most of the time it is. But what I do then is I will take that and I will send that out to Montana, the teeth, and they take that tooth and they age it. That's the truly only way that you can tell a deer's age. If you sit there and say, hey, I can tell because of the belly sag and the way the back is and stuff, most of the time you can get somewhat close. But once they get to that 4 or 5 years, it's pretty tough to know exactly what that deer is from year to year. I mean, people are just like, deer, I should say, deer are like people, everybody's genetics are different. You've got some people that will never be 100 and, they're 150 pounds their whole life or 160 pounds. You've got other guys, that are 6'4", 340 pounds. And some of those guys, and that's in high school. And so you look at it and say, man, that deer is big and fat and big belly on it. That thing's got to be a 6-year-old deer. That deer could be a 3-year-old. That's the genetics that deer has. So you're really not going to tell until you take that and have their teeth cut and find out. And I do that with all my deer. So that gives me a better idea from year to year what I'm looking at and how I want to manage our farms.
Yeah, and you guys are holding more mature deer, I think, because they want to be on your property. All that hard work that you guys have done, years of work. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They think they can come on a piece of property or in 1 or 2 years have it to where they think it should be. And you'd be hard-pressed to do that. It's a multi-year process to achieve that bedding, TSA work that you guys do, ponds, just everything. It's 5+ year project, right?
Oh, way more than that. I mean, you can't grow a 5-year-old deer in 1 year. I mean, that's impossible.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go too. I think it depends. Right. When Art does his habitat jobs, he tells people or consults, it's a 3 to 5 year plan, and some of that's based on how long it's going to take for the land to change or the plants to change. A lot of it's honestly money and time, being aware that, unless the customer is, retired or has the equipment and or money to do it all right away, most of the time, it would be done in phases just as time and money allows. But yeah, like Art said, if you currently don't have a 3-year-old deer, you're not going to get him to 5 in just 1 year. So depends on what the current age structure is too that you've got, for sure.
Yeah, and you need to have the willpower to hold off and not shoot a younger deer. If you say, "Oh, I'm only going to shoot one," this 3-year-old, well, there's just more time that has to add on to that project to get to that mature deer.
We're always seeing, and I know Art, I think you just had this same conversation with at least 2 other people that I can think of. The old well, I might as well shoot it because my neighbor's going to anyways. Well, the whole thing is, then your neighbor's still going to shoot a deer, whatever walks by, or another really great 2 or 3-year-old with potential. So now you've lost 2. If you shoot one also, and then the neighbor's going to, hunt until they shoot one, then you've lost 2. Where if you let it go, the neighbor shoots the buck, then they're done. Then they've used their buck tag, and they're done. We have to kind of get past that old excuse that it's easy to give yourself about, well, the neighbor would shoot it anyways.
The best thing to do is come up with a plan and stick with the plan. Don't deviate from that plan. Right. It's going to cost you.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And, I don't own their land. I don't buy their tags. I don't, so I can't tell my neighbors what to do. I can't tell my friends what to do. I can suggest and say, this has worked for us if they want that opinion. Some people don't even want the opinion. They're just going to shoot what they want. That's fine. They can do that. It's the ones that come to us and say, hey, you know what? I can't get any 4-year-olds, or I can't get any 5-year-olds, or, everybody's on well, you know what? You have to lay down ground rules then. If it's your property, you own it, You're the one who lays down the ground rules, not the people hunting it. And I unfortunately, I had a friend that, he didn't listen to the ground rules, and we're still very good friends, but because of what those ground rules were, he has not been able to hunt my property for years now. And it's, unfortunate, but that's just the way it was. And, now I have other people, I've got other people in there hunting and doing things, and they abide by the ground rules that we have. And one of the biggest things that I hear, all the time is I will show sometimes in my seminars things that I'm doing. I'll show 2 pictures side by side. I'll show a 3-year-old that's 155, 160 inch deer. On the other side, I will show a 5 or 6-year-old deer that's 130 or 135 inch deer. And I'll say, which one would you shoot? When I'm doing like a management thing and they're asking about management, which one would you shoot? And 95% of them always say the 3-year-old. And I say, why? And they say, look at the headgear. And I said, correct. I said, that deer then, because it's only 3, that is your booner. So if you shoot him, not only are you not going to shoot your booner, but you've just taken those genetics out of your gene pool and still let that genetics of that older deer that's only 130, 135 inch deer, now that is going to be your breeder buck for the year because you've already killed that other deer. What you need to do, if you're interested in that, is you shoot that bigger deer, the bigger bodied, the smaller rack deer, because he's older. Get rid of that deer. The following year, you now have your 4.5-year-old mature deer, or getting mature deer, that's probably your 170 inch booner. And now, not only, is it your booner, but you've also spread those genetics. That's the mentality that we have to get to, though, if you want to do, the complete management process, the land management, the deer, everything else. It's tough. I'm not going to lie to you. It's tough. It's tough when you pass a 150 inch deer, 160 inch deer, and then your neighbor shoots it and says, well, I thought it was a different deer. Well, again, it jumped the fence. You don't own that deer. Nobody really owns it, so it's a chance you have to take, and it takes a lot of time to get to that point to be able to say, I'm passing a 150 inch deer. There's not a lot of people. There's a handful. I've done it a lot, but there's a handful, that I can name off, the top of my head that they're going to pass that deer. And it all depends. A lot of it depends on the area too. And I don't want people to get misconceptions that you do all this stuff and you're going to grow those. Again, it depends on the genetics, depends on what area of the country you're from. The statistics show not many people are ever going to shoot a Pope and Young white-tailed deer. There's 10 to 15% that consistently kill those deer. And that is, a lot of that is because they own the land, they put in the work, they manage that. So they can do that. A lot of people that hunt public land, and some of the small private lands around that, they don't have that opportunity. So they shoot what they shoot, which is fine. And people need to quit bashing that. That's I'm so tired of this stuff on social media of, man, you shot a deer that that would have been a great deer next year. That would have been a great deer in 2-3 years down the road. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of listening to people, crossbow isn't really bow hunting. It's blah, blah, blah. Okay, maybe it's not to you, but you don't know the story. Is it a kid? Is it somebody who had surgery? And they just want to go out and enjoy the outdoors.
Or if it's legal.
Right.
We don't even have to go down that road.
Yeah,
Yep.
It's 100% legal. And
Don't
that's
need
the
a
thing.
reason.
Right, you don't need it. Let them do what they want to do.
We can go back to everything that was new, and us as hunters were against it. Tree stands, we were against them at first. Compound bows, we were against.
Expandable broadheads.
Expandable broadheads.
There's everything.
Now it's crossbows and trail cameras, and as hunters, we need to do what's legal and what's right. And praise everybody that's doing it that way.
100%. It's if they start going down that road, and the funny part is a lot of the guys that are saying this stuff also rifle hunt. Well, where does that stop? If you've got a guy who still shoots a straight wall cartridge, or has a 30-30 or 32 special, something like that, that's, 150-yard gun, that's it. And then the next guy goes out there and he spends a boatload of money and has a long-range rifle built that, he's killing deer at 1,000, 1,200 yards. Okay, so where's that end? And who cares? It's legal. Let them do it. Until the legislation says we can't do it, knock it off, because all we're doing is fighting amongst ourselves and ruining our sport that we love for the next generation. But
right.
Now that we're off that,
Yeah,
Good. I was going to pull you off that topic.
right.
I get a little heated with that. So.
Well, yeah, you're passionate, but I think, like we said, if it's legal, go for it. What do you think the next few weeks are going to look like around here as we start to transition from some early season stuff into maybe some pre-rut and rut activity later in the month?
Well, I think what's going to happen over the next couple weeks is, we just got back from a duck hunt, which everything got really cool, and we had a big cool down after all that, and now they're talking, for these next couple weeks here, the end of October, we're supposed to get some decent cooler weather. So I think the transition's going to come out of that, their little phase where nobody ever sees them, and, the deer take a trip to Tahiti for, a couple weeks, and, I hear that every year, and all my deer disappeared, they're completely gone, blah, blah, blah. Well, they didn't take a trip anywhere. They're somewhere. They're probably on acorns or something close. And in that transition stage between early season and pre-rut, they know what's coming on, especially those older bucks. They understand as the daylight gets shorter, and that's what triggers the rut, is the daylight. And so as that daylight gets shorter and shorter, those deer know that breeding season is coming close. So they stay in the highest protein area food sources that they can find, whether that's acorns, whether that's what you have planted, beans, corn, different brassicas, food sources, whatever you have, that's where those deer are. And they're not going to move very far. And so what happens during that season is a lot of people bump those deer because they're staying so close to those that they haven't set a way to get in and out of their stands without bumping those deer. They've bumped them to the neighbors. So if you have that, I suggest you just kind of wait until you get into that, 20th, 18th to 20th of October phase, and then you're going to start running that pre-rut. You're going to start on those cool downs. You're going to see a lot more deer moving. They're going to be transitioning into that pre-rut. They're going to start opening more scrapes. They're going to start getting a little more vocal. They're going to be checking those food plots more often. And as those daylight changes, you're actually going to see some of those bigger deer are going to start daylighting even a little bit more in anticipation to what's going to happen, especially on those good cold front days. Those deer are really going to want to get out and see who's in the area and what's going on and get ready for that rut.
Absolutely. I'd be looking for that first cold front, plan a hunt around that. As we get later in October, rattling, grunting, you'll see the small bucks doing some chasing around, and actually a real good time to shoot a buck, I think.
Yeah, it is. And, over the next week, like this last week when we were up duck hunting, we had a big cool down. We went from 80s down into the 60s and upper 50s. And, so there's little bucks were already out chasing, doing some things, and having, every year at the same time, same place, I start getting phone calls and I start getting text messages. What do you think? You think the rut started, with this cold front, these deer up moving? And I'm like, you seeing any really big deer moving? No, I'm seeing a lot of little bucks chasing does. And I'm like, well, that's no different than your teenage kid, that teenager's chasing those does 24/7, 365. He's going to figure out where those, younger, same age, I shouldn't say younger, but same age girls as him and those high school girls where they're working, and he's going to go, bother them at their work and everything else, hoping to get a date with them. It's no different than these bucks. They're young bucks. They don't understand. They haven't been there yet. So they're burning that energy. They don't care. Where the old bucks are still conserving energy, is they're waiting for that timing to get right and do what they have to do. So, transition to those food sources when you get into that 20th of October, that week towards the end, towards Halloween, you're going to look at those food sources and, start hunting those, as those bucks are going to check those more for those does. And then as you get a little bit later into October, first part of November, you're going to start transitioning, and especially in the middle of the day, you want to start hunting those funnels, because those bucks are going to check those does on the food sources in the morning and in the evening. But during the day, they're going to be running funnels, getting from one bedding area to the other bedding area to the other bedding area, and just checking and scent checking those things for does, and if any of those does are in, are coming into heat yet. So they're the areas that you need to start focusing on coming up here shortly.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind, now is not the time to burn yourself out on sitting on stands. The better hunting's yet to come. Pick your days, watch trail cameras. Good trail cameras, you're going to know when the deer are moving and when the mature bucks start to move, and that's when you want to maximize your time in a stand, right?
Right.
I know right now, at least on our property, we've got several stands, particularly ones where we've got some food plots, and our larger food plots. We pretty much lay off of those in the morning, so we don't bump them. What time, when do you think we'll start, pushing it and doing some morning hunting?
Oh, I think you're going to see probably that end of October, that 20th of October to that week anyway. You're going to start seeing, depending on what cameras show too, but you're really going to start seeing that transition then as they start hitting those scrapes and stuff more. I won't probably be hunting food sources quite as much in the morning. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be hunting those scrapes and those ridges coming off the food plot between there and bedding, so that I'm not bumping them off that bedding yet, just letting them come back from checking those does in that early like that, and then opening those scrapes to see what's going on their way back to bedding. So that's where you're going to see us probably in the mornings and doing more of that at that time, as soon as we get into that week of the 20th. So, and then, we'll unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, fortunately for us, because this is what we do, or what I do, is once I hit that stage, my mindset has to change, because it's going to be, 30, 40 days straight, morning, night, evening, all day sits, and not just in Wisconsin. We're going to be hitting different states and going different areas and get wore down pretty quick. And, and so like Brad said, don't burn yourself out now. And I used to do that. I used to burn myself out, and I would start sitting opening day until it was closed. Now I'm picking and choosing what are the best days, and when are my best opportunities to go out there and shoot a deer without screwing things up and pushing those deer off our property.
So I know you guys hunt Southern Illinois. What's the difference in rut from here to there, Art? Is it a week, 10 days difference?
It's, I would say, 5 days to a week. It seems, we've been going down there trying to hit that pre-rut the end of October, and it isn't happening yet. We're just hitting some things here, and we go down and said we're going to do that. Well, this year we're not going to do that, and we're going to change it up a little bit and go down a little bit later, and then we'll probably get there, and the other guys on the lease with us will already been there and shot all of our good deer. But
right,
that happens too. But
I can't remember. No, we're going to be there over my birthday.
Oh boy.
Which is not unusual that we're on a deer trip over my birthday. And we've been down there at least once before on my birthday. Because we always go out for dinner with the group. I'm trying to remember though if we if we were seeing, who shot deer while we were there, and like what the activity was like.
Yeah, I think it all depends too on weather down there. The thing is it's such a big area, and it's a whole different way to hunt down there than it is here, because up here we have, 200, 300, 400 acre lots of woods with very small fields here and there, at least where we hunt. I mean, I can literally go miles without ever walking into a field, through the woods, through my neighbors and everybody else. I mean, it goes forever. Where down there, there's small woodlots and big fields. So, part of it, I think, too, is when we've been down there early, is the corn hasn't been off yet. There's still a lot of standing corn. And so, when you're looking at a square mile, 640 acres, you may only have 100, 200 acres of that total is in woods, in little patches here and there, and the rest of it is all ag ground. And so those deer, they're laying in those cornfields and doing their stuff, where now all of a sudden they switch and they take that corn out, and now they don't have any place, they've got to go to those woodlots. But the problem is, which woodlot? That's the difference there, is trying to pattern them, because they move overnight from one woodlot to the next, to the next, to the next, where, when those does are in heat and what they're doing. So
what are you doing then? Are you hunting like travel corridors from, lots to lots, or?
Yeah, we're hunting a lot of, small food plots, and creek bottoms. And so we're sitting on those creek bottoms, and that's where those deer want to travel. They want to, because those fields are gone now they're traveling a creek bottom or a small little wood line, or fence row. And they're following those fence rows from, for a half mile or a mile across these fields. That's where you've got to be, because if they're going to go from one to the other and want that cover, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they'll be 50 yards out in that field or 60 yards out in that field, just kind of heading to wherever they're going, to the next field or the next woodlot. But that's how you got to hunt it. You got to hunt those, creek beds. You've got to hunt those fence rows and small woodlots, because they're going to come in there looking for does. Those does are coming into those small woodlots to bed, and that's where those bucks are going to come in and start checking those before they move off to the next one. So, but wind is very important. That's one thing when you're hunting those like that, and especially here, if you're hunting ridges, you have to really take the wind into consideration, because if you are hunting a north wind, so if it's a north wind, those deer are going to stay on the south side for the majority of a ridge, because then what they can do is they can smell those deer in that food plot, or if they're bedded on the north side of that food plot. So those bucks are going to run the southern side of that, so they don't have to waste as much energy, and they're just going to keep moving from one to one. That's why I say you hunt the funnels and stuff at that time. But you need to make sure that you are, on the downwind side of that field, and where that deer wants to travel on the south side of that field. If the wind is coming out of the south, he's going to do the same to the north side of the field. East-west, same thing. It's going to be the same down there on those woodlots. Because they're small enough, he may run the whole southern side of that 5-acre woodlot and never have to step into it. Because it might just be a long, narrow 5 acres, and he doesn't have to ever step in there, because he can smell the whole thing with a strong enough wind and know that there's no does in there that are in heat. So why do I even need to go in there? If he smells them, then he's going to go in there. But otherwise, so play that wind to your favor and how that deer wants to travel. Think about how that deer wants to travel, and just say, well, man, I've seen the deer up here. Yeah, but that's going to change now when that rut starts. So you got to hunt it different.
Great points, actually.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun year. The problem this year, I think, with a lot of areas, parts of Wisconsin, we've had CWD, EHD, different things. So we've lost some of our older deer to the EHD and stuff, and which has been kind of tough. That's another chance you take when you're letting some of these older mature deer go, because they're the first ones that succumb to it. So that gets tough. But then we've got places like Ohio and Indiana and that are just devastated with it right now. And so it's going to be tough sledding for some of these states. And it's going to be years. It's going to be 4 or 5 years before they get back to having that complete age group in some areas within those states. So I feel bad for those guys, and hope that it all works out for those guys.
It looks like Ohio was just hit tremendously hard, that southern part.
Yeah,
I've seen some reports, and it's not good. Not good at all.
It's pretty ugly.
But our good friends at Rack Fuel are trying to help out with their EHD defense too.
Yeah,
so.
their EH defense, and that's a great thing. As far as treating water and how to treat it, and people are like, well, some of it can be expensive. Well, some of it can be, but I tell people when I go out and do my land management, I'm like, big deer cost money. Bottom line, and I don't lie to anybody about it. You want big deer, they're going to cost you money. Land costs you money. Taxes cost you money. Food plots cost you money. All this stuff costs. Building roads, doing timber stand improvement through chainsaws, gas, all this stuff. It's all money. So it all depends on what you truly want. If you just want a place to go out and enjoy it and do your thing, great. If you want to grow big deer, I'm telling you right now, you better start budgeting some things in your pocketbook, because you're going to want to do things like this EH defense to put it on your ponds, help keep that water clean, help so those midges don't grow in there, put in the best food plots, do your timber stand, do all this stuff. Just make it so those animals want to be there and be healthier. The more you can give them, the better you give them, the healthier your herd is, the better your herd is, and the better chance you have of growing those older mature deer. It's I hate to break that news to everybody, but you better bring out the pocketbook. That's the way it goes.
Well, I think we covered a lot today. It's been a little bit of a slow start for us here, at least for deer season, but I think we've got the best, like Brad said, the best is yet to come.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah, so looking forward to the next few weeks here, as well as our hunt in Illinois. But everyone out there, be patient if you need to. Let's all look forward to the best is yet to come in our deer hunting season here in the Midwest, and own the season.
Follow Own the Season Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for listening.
Check back weekly for new episodes.